my blissful selves. Today, let us know in brief about tapas. So, what is tapas? Tapa means to eat. What we have to eat? So, you have to eat the moha, the craziness of sensory objects. Why we have to burn the craziness of sensory objects? The craziness of sensory objects gives us unhappiness. And if at all we have to become happy, we have to burn the craziness of sensory objects. So the craziness of sensory objects gives unhappiness. Generally, what we do, we burn the firewood, but the craziness of sensory objects and the gross body and gross body consciousness. So all these are the cause of unhappiness. And if at all we have to become free from unhappiness, so we have to burn the craziness of sensory objects, the craziness of gross body, and we have to transcend the gross body consciousness. The craziness of sensory objects and the gross body and the gross body consciousness can be burned only by the power of discrimination. So we can do this by living in a house or by living in a forest. Both means the same. And if we inquire whether there is a happiness in sensory objects or not, in gross body or not, or we are gross body or not, by living in a house. So our house becomes tapovana. And for this, there is no necessity to go to the forest for this purpose. So you might have heard the name of King Janaka. King Janaka was organizing meetings to know the problems of life and to solve them. Once he called a meeting of learned people, Vidvat Sabha, like that. There was a boy of 12 years old by name Astavakra. He was called as Astavakra because his body was bent at 8 places. He entered the hall of learned people, and when the learned people saw this boy, they started laughing continuously. Later, they stopped laughing. Then the boy Astavakra started laughing continuously. Then King Janaka asked Astavakra, they laughed at you by seeing your body because it is bent at 8 places. But why you are laughing now? Like that. Then Astavakra says, they saw my skin only, my gross body only. But they have not been in a position to see myself within. Like that, they are skinners only. They are not learned people. And that is how I have been laughing continuously. Like that, boy Astavakra explained to King Janaka. So those only who see the body are skinners, and those who see the self within the body are called learned people. So the body may be white, or it may be black, or it may be red, or one may be rich, the others may be the poor, one may be a king, the other may be a servant. Like that, one may be wearing golden ornaments, but the other may not. But the self that has been present within our body is the same in all. We have to see all the living beings the same. We have to treat all the living beings as our equals. Then only there will be peace in the house, in the lane, in the village, in the town, or taluka, district, state, country, and the whole world. You cannot buy this peace of mind from the shops. To err is human, and to forgive is divine. So we have to forgive the sinners, and we have to teach them good thoughts, good talking, and good actions. And we have to elect good people, and the good people that have been elected. Later, they will look after all the people equally, and there will be peace in the society. So, those who are contented with whatever they have got according to their prarabdha actions are only happy. But those who are not contented with whatever they have got according to their prarabdha actions, for example, if a other person buys a car, and if this person thinks to have a car or buy a car, and if he cannot, so he will be unhappy. If at all we have to be happy, we have to be satisfied or contented with whatever we get according to our prarabdha actions. So, what is precious? Whether the gross body is precious or the self that is within our gross body is precious. So, the self or the Atman that is present within our body is very precious. We talk when we are living, but we don't talk when we die. So, who is the talker? The Atman, the self is the talker. Generally, the material scientists have studied about the gross body, the eyes, the nose, the tongue, the skin, the ear, the mouth, the hands, the legs, the anus, and the genital organs. And they study about the pranas, the intellect, the mind, the memory, and egoism. But they are not studied about the self, the Atman. If you win the whole world and if you lose your own soul, what it can befit thee? Because the permanent happiness is in the self. And if you lose the self, what happens? We will be unhappy. And if you win the whole world, in the whole world there is happiness only. What we will get by that? We win the whole world. But the whole world is of the nature of unhappiness. We will get only happiness only. So usually what we do, we see the sensory objects. Our eyes see the sensory objects. So our eyes are superior to the sensory objects. And our eyes have been known by the nerves behind. So the nerves are superior to our eyes. And our nerves have been known by our brain. So brain is superior to the nerves. The brain is known by the mind. So the mind is superior to the brain. And the mind is known by the Atman or the self. So Atman or the self is superior to the mind. And no one knows the self. So the self is superior to all. So that is why we have to listen about the self. We can reflect over it. And we have to realize and experience that is permanent happiness. Usually what we do, no? We felicitate the people. When we felicitate the people, whether we felicitate the body or the self, so this is the gross body. And in the gross body, there is the subtle body. And in that subtle body, our Atman is there. When our subtle body with the Atman leaves our gross body, what value is there to the gross body? It is dead, just a dead body. It is just a earth. So the self is superior to the gross body. So if the self is superior to all, we have to felicitate the self within the gross body. But we need not felicitate the gross body or the skin of the gross body. So when we see the people, we need not see the gross body, but we have to see the self within that gross body. We have to see the self within the gross body of others. And the others have to see the self within our body, within us. In the same way, if we see others, we have to explain the self that is there within their body. And they have to explain about the self that is there in our body. And this has been called divine life. What is Adhyatma? Atma adhigachyati Adhyatma. Adhyatma means to become one with the Atman. To become one with the Atman is called Adhyatma. So the listening about Atma, the reflecting upon the Atman gives us permanent happiness. And those who don't reflect upon the Atman, they will not all be happy. And if they live in a house, in a lane, village, country, all of these will be hell. There will be hell only. So says the Saint Basavanna. All the human beings take food, they sleep, they fear, and they involve in sexual indulgence. So this is common for human beings, for birds, and the beasts. But the birds and the beasts have no power of reason. Whether what is happiness or unhappiness, whether they are the self or the non self. They have no power of reason. But man has the power of reason to know what is happiness and what is unhappiness, what is Atman and what is not Atman. So, this power of reason is there in human individuals. So, usually they say, no, Manava Matra Muktoho. Because the human beings have this power of reason, they can liberate from all unhappiness. But the birds and the beasts, they have no power of reasoning what is happiness and unhappiness, what is self and non self, and they cannot be liberated from the unhappiness like that. So, if that is the case, why there is unhappiness? If we inquire why there is unhappiness, what is the cause of unhappiness? The cause of unhappiness is the sensory objects are givers of happiness. The thinking that this gross body gives happiness. The thinking that we are the gross body. So these are the only causes of unhappiness. And if we try to know whether there is a happiness or not in the sensory objects, we will come to know that there is no happiness in sensory objects. Because the sensual enjoyment ends in tiresomeness and weariness. And if we inquire whether our gross body gives happiness or not, gross body consciousness gives happiness or not, the gross body or the gross body consciousness gives us only unhappiness. In deep sleep, we have no body consciousness, gross body consciousness, and we are happy. But when we wake up from the deep sleep, so there will be hunger, there will be thirst, cold, heat, saltiness, insult, there will be disease, there will be old age, wherein we cannot see anything by our eyes, we cannot listen by our ears, We cannot balance ourselves and we cannot remember whatever we talk like that. And when there is body consciousness, there will be the desire to enjoy the sensory objects. And there will be fear of death. So, like that, the gross body or the gross body consciousness gives us unhappiness only. And if we come to know that there is no happiness in sensory objects, in gross body and gross body consciousness, there will be no six enemies like that desire, kama, krodha, anger, moha, craziness of sensory objects, lobha, greed, egoism, mada, and jealousy, matsara, like that. So all these will not all be there in our mind. And even outside, there will be no six enemies. So if we come to know like this, there is no happiness in sensory objects, and there is no happiness in gross body or a gross body consciousness. So we will have no enemies at all in our mind or outside. So we'll have no unhappiness as such. Uh, the hunger, the thirst, the heat, the cold, sultriness, insult, disease, old age, the desire to enjoy sensory objects, and fear of death. So, like this, if we try to inquire whether there is a happiness in sensory objects or the gross body or gross body consciousness, there will be only unhappiness in sensory objects. And the gross body or the gross body consciousness gives us unhappiness, as such thirst, hunger, etc. And if we think like that, so we will be completely free from unhappiness. So this liberation from unhappiness or attaining complete happiness is not at all possible by the gods and the goddesses. The gods and goddesses have only waking state, and they cannot reason whether there is happiness in sensory objects or the gross body or gross body consciousness. So they cannot be in a position. The gods, the so-called gods and goddesses, will not all be in a position to attain complete happiness or the so-called liberation from unhappiness. But the human beings concerned have all the three states. And by all these three states, he can reason out what is happiness and what is unhappiness, like that. By the waking state, in the waking state, if we try to know, there is only unhappiness. Nobody is happy in waking state. By waking state, man can come to know that there is no happiness in the waking state. Then, for example, about the dream. In a dream, also, no one is happy. It is also like the waking state. But the dream is false. And the waking also is like a dream. And we will come to know by dream, this waking state is false. And if we reason out about our deep sleep, In a deep sleep, we remain as the consciousness. Whether there is anybody in the sleep or not, we know it. Whether we know anything or not in deep sleep, we know it. And whether there is happiness or not, we know it. So in deep sleep, we remain as consciousness. We remain as knowers. And there is nothing other than ourselves. So the happiness that has been experienced in deep sleep is our happiness only. The happiness is in our true self. And like this, if we discriminate whether there is happiness in sensory objects or not, we'll come to know that there is no happiness in sensory objects. And if we inquire whether the gross body gives happiness or not, the gross body consciousness gives happiness or not, we will come to know that even the gross body or the gross body consciousness have not been in a position to give us complete happiness or the so called permanent happiness. So if there is gross body consciousness, so there will be hunger, thirst, heat, code like that, and there is no happiness at all. So like this, by the power of discrimination, if we burn the craziness of sensory objects, the craziness of gross body, and if we transcend the gross body consciousness, we will attain complete liberation from unhappiness and will become permanently happy. And this is called the only tapas. And if we will be in a position to do the tapas like that, we will be completely happy. So that is all about tapas in brief. And by this, I end my talk.